Hello friends, narrator Austin here. Today we have the last section of the final chapter in Book 2 of War of the Ages. Stay tuned after the story is done and after the commercial for how to get the books and also for my book ministry so you can learn about the next book we're going into, Book 3, all about the life of Jesus. Can't wait to share that with you guys. See you in a bit. My name is Mark, a recording angel. I've been observing this earth since the dawn of creation. The Most High has asked me to share my recordings with you. The following are my records of Old Testament prophets and kings, and scheming scoundrels too, collected in this book, Exile of the Chosen, God's Heroes from Solomon to Malachi. If today's recording contains situations which might be uncomfortable for younger listeners, I will mark the video with the words Parental Guidance Recommended. Chapter 12, Part 2, Aisha. It was Esther's turn to go to the king. The maids and Haggai fussed around her, rearranging her hair and adjusting her clothes. "Esther," the head chamberlain announced, "I have had the women bring all your things. Once you have spent your night with the king, you will not be in my palace of virgins any more, but the palace of concubines. Your new chamberlain will be Shah Ashkaz. Don't worry, you'll have everything there that you have had here. I have added some jewelry that I think you will like, and several robes and changes of clothing. Is there anything else you would like? Anything at all? You've been one of my favorites. I'm going to miss you." The girl smiled nervously. You've been very kind to me, Haggai. There is one thing that would make this easier." "Anything. Anything at all." "Because I've grown fond of them, I would like to take my women with me. I've never had a family. As a child, I always thought that one day I would marry and have a husband and children. Now it appears that I probably won't. These 7 are the closest thing I have to family. I would like to keep them with me." Haggai beamed and spread his arms to include all the servant girls. "You may take all of them, and any more that you wish. I could not deny you anything you wanted." "Oh, thank you, Haggai. Having them go with me will mean more to me than anything else you could give me." "I have never met a woman quite like you, Esther. But if giving you a bunch of slave women makes you happy, it's certainly easy to do. May the gods favor you tonight so the king loves you as much as I do." "Thank you, Haggai," she said, and turned and walked with her head held high down the hall toward the palace. The next morning, guards took Esther to the harem of the king's wives. Her servants, who had her quarters all fixed up with her things from the previous harem, now glanced at her shyly, waiting for her to initiate the conversation. She didn't. One of the other concubines dropped by her room and boldly demanded to hear about her night with the king. Her face coloring, Esther glanced up at her. Aisha stepped to the doorway, wanting to intervene, but understanding that it was not her place. She ranked below any of the concubines. "The king is a very interesting man," Esther said finally, "and I enjoyed his company." The other concubine whooped with laughter. "An interesting man? Oh, that's a good one. I don't think anyone here has ever called him that." Esther blushed more. "Word among the servants is that he found you pretty interesting. They say they could hear him talking and laughing clear down the hall, and that you two spent most of the night talking instead of, well, I guess no one will know exactly what went on in there," Aisha interrupted, "unless Esther or the king chooses to tell you." Still Esther said nothing. When the nosy woman had left, Esther slumped in her chair. "It's true, Aisha," she whispered. "I guess I'm not a very exciting concubine, but we did talk all night. I asked him how he had learned how to rule such a diverse group of nations when they were all so different and had such different cultures, and how he knew when to be tolerant and when to make everybody obey the same laws. It was fascinating. He was telling me all about the place he spent the past 2 years and what the people were like there. The king is a very intelligent man. All kings have wise counselors, but this one has wisdom of his own, too. I really liked him. As for—" She shook her head and stared out the window. Aisha placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Maybe he enjoyed your conversations as much as you did." Later, as Aisha stepped out of Esther's apartments, she was almost bowled over by Anexi running down the hall. It's her! He's chosen!" the girl squeaked out in an excited voice. "Who's chosen what? Calm yourself." "My lady, the king, the queen, the—" "Our lady?" Aisha asked, her eyes widening as she realized what the Cushite girl was saying. Behind Anexi, she saw Shah-Ashgaz, the king's chamberlain for his concubine harem. He bowed to Aisha and said, "Is your mistress available?" She was going to... No, yes, she's fine, come in," Aisha stammered. She slipped in ahead of him and announced his approach. Shah-Ashgaz bowed even lower before Esther and then said, "The king has chosen you as his new queen. We need to move you to different chambers here. You will have your own private accommodations at the end of the harem, and your own gardens. There will be a large wedding feast that will require some months of preparation. The king will invite his dignitaries from every province, and he says that you may ask them all any questions you like." Esther burst out laughing. Shah-Ashgaz did not. "May I inquire what he meant by that?" he asked. All of Esther's servants began giggling with merriment. Knowing Esther, they decided that she would do just that. "Meanwhile," Shah-Ashgaz continued, "I know that you are tired and probably need some rest, but while you do, your servants need to transfer your things to more fitting quarters for the Queen of the Persian Empire." "Thank you," Esther choked out. With a nod, he left the room. I can hardly believe this," Esther murmured. Rizpah and Aisha glanced at each other. "I guess if I'm going to worship your God," Aisha whispered to her, "you'd better tell me a little more about him." The Judahite girl broke into a huge smile. "Well, for one," she said, "he has great mercy, and he's the God of second chances and thirds and fourths." "It's just as well," Esther, having overheard Rizpah, murmured to herself. Anexi raised an eyebrow and shrugged. Rizpah and Aisha grinned at each other, and Esther, the new queen of the Persian Empire, stood mysteriously silent. King Ahasuerus invited his princes and servants from all the provinces to the wedding feast, and gave huge gifts to everyone as was his custom. The palace at Shushan was the most enormous and lavishly decorated hall of celebration in the world, and it was all in honor of Esther that night. The king was delighted with his new young wife and her interest and knowledge of the peoples he ruled. Soon, though, the feasting and celebration ended, and life settled into a new pattern. As the days passed, Aisha often observed her queen staring out the window at the gate official below. She could have sworn they somehow knew each other, but she was never quite sure. Her mistress was now the most powerful and wealthy woman in all the Persian Empire. Yet she still had that mysterious, sad streak. Aisha often wished she could know the thoughts of the young queen, but Esther remained a mystery. The usual political gossip continued in the palace. Some of it filtered up to Esther's apartments. Most of it she ignored. However, she was extremely interested when a gate official foiled an assassination attempt on the king. Other palace intrigues continued. Haman the Agagite was always scrambling for power, even though he wielded more of it than anyone but the king. Anexi shook her head. "Some people never seem to have enough power," she commented one day. Esther shrugged. "As long as there are kings, there will be others who want as much power or more as they have. But a wise king is aware of that fact and will rule appropriately." Time passed quickly. Esther had been queen of Persia for several years. The occasions Esther spent with the king were good ones, and they genuinely enjoyed each other's company, but sometimes she had no contact with him for long periods. One day, Aisha watched as the young queen went to her usual spot to stare out the window each morning. Suddenly, Esther let out a cry. "What is it, my queen?" the servant asked. "What's the matter?" "Look!" her mistress said, pointing. The old Judahite who served in the gate area was dressed in sackcloth and ashes, and wailing as he paced back and forth in the street below. "He looks upset," Aisha observed. "Strange, though, that he would permit himself to be seen like that. No one is allowed in the palace dressed that way." That's right," the young queen said, nervously biting her lip. "Please call Haytak and have him go down immediately and take a robe to the old man. Make him change his clothes, then find out what is wrong." She watched as Haytak, her chamberlain, rushed down into the street and conversed with the Judahite. Some minutes later he returned, still carrying the clothes. Several onlookers had followed him into the queen's apartment. "Leave us," Esther ordered. "Everyone but my 7 closest servants and Haytak." The room cleared. She grabbed Haytak's hands. "You must tell me. What is it? What is happening?"
The old man says that there's a death sentence on all Jews."
"All Jews? All of us?"
Rispa said numbly.
Haytak nodded. The gate official is a Jew. He's continually refused to bow to Amen, a fact that has been a thorn in the official's flesh for a long time. Mordecai claims that Amen convinced the king that there was a people scattered throughout his kingdom who were masterminding an insidious plot to overthrow him. The king gave him permission to write a law and offer money to all those who would kill these enemies of the king. They cast lots for the best time to hold the executions. It'll be coming up in less than a year. Then all the Jews in the entire Persian Empire are to die. And, Your Highness, he said such odd things."
"Tell me everything," Esther persisted.
"He said not to think that you would escape the execution. Now, what could he mean? Is he speaking treason against you? Because I could have him arrested."
The queen shook her head and sank into a chair. "I am a Judahite, a Jew," she said after a moment. "The man speaks no treason. He's my uncle. Please go tell him that I have not seen the king for months, that I'm not sure I could do anything to help." Haytak disappeared from the room and came back a few minutes later.
"Your Highness, your uncle says that perhaps you came to the kingdom for such a time as this."
For a long time, Esther sat in silence. Finally, she stood, pulled her shoulders back, and lifted her chin. "Perhaps I did," she said. "My God is a God of second chances. Tell my uncle I will go to the king." Aisha caught her breath.
"But, my queen, how dare you without an invitation? You know how the gods deal with anyone who approaches without permission because of the danger of assassination. You could be executed."
"Yes, I could be," she sighed. "And if I don't go, I could be too." She turned to Haytak. "Tell my uncle to call all the Judahites together and have them pray for me. I and my servants will pray and fast, and then I will go to the king. And if I die, I die." The eunuch left with his message. The women flung their arms around their queen and burst into tears.
"He is a God of second chances," Rispa murmured. "He still hears me, even though my people didn't go back to Jerusalem."
"Nor mine," Esther added.
"And he heard me when I asked him to give you favor in the king's eyes."
"True," Esther smiled through her tears.
"And he will hear us now."
"So you worship this God too?" Aisha asked her queen. "Yes, but my uncle told me to keep it a secret. I, too, have been praying to him for unto 3 years now," Aisha explained. The time of fasting and prayer Esther had requested the Jewish community to have had come to an end. Aisha dressed her queen in her most magnificent robes. Then she and her fellow servants prayed one more time together. Finally they stood. Everything was done. It was time to go. Aisha couldn't imagine life without Esther. The queen was the kindest person she had ever known. Yet Persian law demanded the death of anyone who approached the king without an invitation. Would he make an exception for Esther? They reached the outer court of the palace. Esther stood in the doorway where he could see her. The voices in the chamber dropped to silence. Everyone stared in shock. Aisha could hardly breathe. Suddenly, the king broke into a huge smile and held out his scepter to her. She approached, touched the end of it, and bowed. "What is it you want, my pretty queen? I'll give you anything your heart desires, up to half of my kingdom." Everyone caught their breath. What did the queen want? "I would like you and Haman to come to my apartments for a banquet tonight," she said. The king roared with pleased laughter. "Ha ha! I will be there." That evening, the king asked, "This has been a wonderful banquet. Say, what is it that is on your mind, my queen? What do you desire?" She knelt by him. "Would you come back again, you and Haman, tomorrow night? I have enjoyed this so much." The king enthusiastically accepted her invitation. Haman seemed especially pleased. The next day, as Esther and her servants nervously planned the evening's activities, Hatak, the queen's chamberlain, interrupted them. He was laughing so hard that he could hardly give the queen his message.
Your Highness, he said, you must look out the window. It will cheer you greatly.
I don't have time, Esther replied, checking over baskets of fruit and other supplies for the banquet. Just tell me.
Haman's leading your uncle through the streets on the king's horse. Mordecai's wearing the king's robe. As he goes along, Haman has to shout, "This shall be done to whom the king wishes to honor."
Esther paused in total shock, then began to laugh. How did this happen?
Last night, the king couldn't sleep, so he had the scribe read him from the royal chronicles. The scribe ran across the incident in which Mordecai exposed the plot that Bigthan and Teresh had made against his majesty. The king asked how Mordecai had been rewarded, and when he heard that he had not been, he immediately decided to do something about it. Unfortunately for Haman, a little later, he came in, and the king asked him what he should do for someone he wanted to honor. I assume Haman thought the king was talking about him, so this is what he suggested.
It must be making him furious, she said.
Oh, I think so, and he'll be worn out by tonight when he comes to your banquet.
That night, as Esther expected, the king was in a jovial mood, and Haman looked like a thundercloud. She received them graciously and provided an even more lavish banquet than the night before.
"So, my queen," said the king, turning to her, "you've entertained us beautifully 2 nights in a row. What is it that's on your mind? Do anything in the world you desire."
Instead of breaking into a smile, Esther's eyes welled up with tears.
"Then save me and my people. Don't let us be killed."
She started to cry.
The king jumped to his feet. "Who is it that's plotting to kill you? And how dare they?"
Esther rose to her feet and pointed.
"This man," she said, indicating Haman. "This wicked Haman."
"Haman?" shouted the king. "How dare he?"
He exploded out through the double doors into the gardens, pacing back and forth.
Your Highness, save me, I beg you."
Haman squeaked. He flung himself at her feet, trying to grab her legs. Esther fell over onto the couch. Just then, the king burst back into the room to see them both toppling over.
"Would you attack the queen in her own apartments and in my presence?" he shouted. "Guards!"
The queen's palace was quiet. The servants had all knelt and prayed with Esther and offered their thanks to the God of Israel, who was the God of second, third, and fourth chances. The God who had protected them removed their enemy Haman and impressed the king to allow the Jews to compose whatever laws they wished to protect themselves, though he could not reverse the one Haman had written earlier. The date for the mass slaughter of the Jews had come and gone. None of God's people in the Persian Empire had been killed, but many of their enemies did die. And now, 7 women from 7 different backgrounds all clasped hands with their queen and gave honor to the mighty one who was not just the God of Israel, but every country they had come from, as well as ruler of the universe. And I bowed with them, as my heart swelled with pride in my King and my Creator, God of the angels, and yes, even God of humans, God of second chances.
This broadcast has come from the book Exile of the Chosen by Sally Pierson Dillon, with permission from the Review and Herald Publishing Association. This book and the rest of the series, War of the Ages, can be purchased by going to www.adventistbookcenter.com or by calling 1-800-765-6955. I'm your narrator, Austin Backus, and this audio project is a gift to you from my free Christian book ministry, RXF 1888. Please visit our website, www.rxf1888.com, to request free Christian books for both kids and adults. And join us here again for more stories from Mark, the Recording Angel. Hello again, friends. Oh, I hope you've enjoyed book 2 as much as I did. And up next, we're going to have book 3 in the series, Victory of the Warrior King. Now we enter the New Testament with the story of Jesus. You guys, book 3 is my favorite in the whole series. I loved it so much that when I first started recording these books back in 2020, I started with book 3. And now in 2022, with today's video, the entire 5 books are complete, and you can find the entire series on my YouTube channel. So I hope you will take time to watch the ones that you may not have seen so far. It's been a real joy narrating, recording, editing, and uploading these books for you, and I can't wait to do it again with other quality Christian books. If you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, please do. That'll be the easiest way for me to update you when new projects drop. God bless you all. Bye.